Sadness is certainly a real emotion. There are many things that make us sad. Sometimes seeing the suffering of others, sometimes running up against our own disappointments, sometimes the loss of something important to us or someone important to us. The list goes on. Indeed, sorrow and sadness is a very complex emotion in society. It tends to be suppressed by others who don't want to reciprocate that feeling or who feel as though that feeling is negative and brings them down. I want to argue, though, that sadness is actually a constructive emotion. And I think that sadness is a constructive emotion because sadness isn't necessarily self pity. One of the negative connotations and implications that people usually infer on sadness is that it's basically the same as self pity. This isn't necessarily true because sadness is a kind of judgment that we make on our subjective states of being, on the states of being of the world itself, the external world. So sadness is both the manifestation of the internal and the external. And in that way, I think sadness is a pretty powerful emotion because it allows us to get in tune with some of the harder things to grapple with, some of the more difficult things to grapple with. I think this is one of the reasons why Edgar Allan Poe suffered from melancholy, was because he was very in tune with many of the dark things that existed in the world. Brooding and the like isn't necessarily bad because it allows us to get in tune with a lot of things that are otherwise difficult to consider. Often we think of sadness as the opposite of happiness. I don't think this is necessarily true in the sense that it seems that we look at sadness and happiness in that model as the same extremes as pain and pleasure. So one is good, the other is bad. So we think of happiness as something to strive for, and we think of sadness as something to avoid. And I think this is misleading because I think sadness is indeed a relevant judgment of the world, and it is a relevant judgment, as I've been saying, of our internal world and the external world. And I think it's a feeling that we shouldn't take for granted. I think the reason why a lot of people look at sadness as something negative is because they feel like it brings them down, but I think this is more of a commentary on how hard it is to be empathetic towards others. So often in our efficient society, we tend to think that what we need to do is solve people's sadness. We need to solve that problem, and we need to do that by basically giving them a lot of recommendations. In my experience with observing other people and even observing how people talk to me and engage with my own sadness, this is often not very effective because many times sadness is an emotion that you have to write out. You have to write out the emotion because it's there for a reason. The sadness is telling you something. And I want to indeed mention and discuss or talk about what I'm even talking about when it comes to sadness and how I'm defining it. And I would say that sadness is not the same as melancholy per se. Melancholy is more of a sustained sadness and more intense sadness. Sadness is more of just like a kind of discontentment, a disappointment with various things in the world and in your life. And sadness can sometimes take the form as disappointment with yourself and disappointment with who you are. It can be discouragement as well. And I think that these feelings aren't necessarily the best in the world, but I wouldn't say that they're neither unhealthy or healthy. I think that they're an important part to how we figure out how to integrate into the world, how we figure out how to become a part of the world, because they are very genuine, they are very real feelings. Happiness sometimes is not genuine because it is simply something that exists because we feel good, while sadness is not that. Sadness is a feeling that we feel when we aren't feeling good, and it's not even something that's desirable, but that doesn't mean that it's not necessarily helpful in various ways. And so again, to go back to my definition of sadness, I would just define sadness as this feeling, this kind of sometimes overwhelming feeling of discouragement and this overwhelming nature that, or this overwhelming feeling that you have missed something, that there is loss, that there is something that you haven't succeeded with, and the like, and also again disappointment with the way the external world is, maybe with suffering in the world or maybe with others' behaviors. And I think these feelings are important because they can guide us, they can guide our behavior in a way that can make us stronger, in a way that can make us more sympathetic towards others, more empathetic towards others. And I think that generally these feelings of sadness are telling us things. There's a lot that I could say about sadness. I might talk about it in the future, but I kind of just wanted to get these general thoughts out in order to kind of get the ball rolling on these ideas, and I hope that you can engage with them, and I hope that you find some of them helpful. This is Phoenix, and thank you.